Not every destination is meant to be explored. Some places don't welcome visitors. They wait for them. Hidden beyond the postcards and travel guides are locations shaped by silence, by history, by things people don't fully understand. Places where beauty hides danger, where the landscape can turn without warning, and where leaving isn't always guaranteed. Most people travel to escape, but here, you might be stepping into something you can't escape from. This is Midnight Routes. And tonight, we're taking you somewhere you were never meant to find.
Pripyat, the Soviet city, frozen in 1986, and why you can visit it right now. There's a city in northern Ukraine where the clock stopped at 1:23 in the morning on April 26, 1986. Not metaphorically, literally. The wristwatches left behind on bedside tables, the wall clocks in kindergartens, the ticking mechanisms in apartments that were evacuated so fast, people left their breakfast on the table. This is Pripyat, and almost 40 years later, you can walk its streets. Part 1. What Pripyat was. Before we talk about what happened, we need to understand what Pripyat was, because most people skip this part. Pripyat wasn't just some industrial outpost. It was a showpiece. Founded in 1970, it was one of 9 Soviet atomgrads, atomic cities, purpose-built to house the workers of nearby nuclear power plants. And Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, sitting just 3 kilometers away, was one of the crown jewels of Soviet engineering. The people who lived here were the elite of the Soviet working class, scientists, engineers, their families. Average age, just 26 years old. This was a young city, optimistic, modern by Soviet standards. Pripyat had a hotel, a cinema, an Olympic-standard swimming pool, 16 nurseries and schools, a river port on the Pripyat River, a palace of culture with a concert hall, library, and ballroom. The supermarkets were stocked with foods that ordinary Soviet citizens in other cities could only dream about, a perk of working on the nuclear program. On the evening of April 25, 1986, nearly 50,000 people lived here. They went to bed in what they believed was one of the most modern, secure, desirable cities in the Soviet Union. They would never come back. Part 2. The night everything changed. At 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986, Reactor Number 4 at the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant suffered a catastrophic explosion during a safety test gone wrong. The details of why it happened are complicated. A flawed reactor design, a chain of human errors, a culture within the Soviet system that made it nearly impossible for workers to report safety concerns upward. But the result was this. The reactor's 1,000-ton lid was blown clean off. 2 explosions tore open the building. Radioactive material, graphite, fuel, reactor core, was launched into the night sky. The radioactive cloud didn't stay in Ukraine. It drifted northwest. Sweden detected anomalous radiation days later. Eventually, traces were found across Europe. 35 countries were affected by fallout. But in Pripyat, just 3 kilometers from the source, they told people nothing. The city woke up on April 26th and went about it Saturday. Children played outside. People worked in their gardens. Couples walked by the river. Firefighters who'd responded to the fire at the plant were already dying in hospital, but nobody told the city. It took the Soviet government 36 hours to order an evacuation. 36 hours. When loudspeakers finally announced the evacuation on the afternoon of April 27th, residents were told, "Take 3 days of essentials. You'll be back soon." They weren't. Over 1,200 buses arrived. In under 3 hours, 50,000 people left. Pets abandoned, apartments left unlocked. A city left exactly as it was at 2 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon in April. The 3 days became forever. Part 3. What the city looks like now. What makes Pripyat so uniquely haunting isn't just the abandonment, it's the specificity of the abandonment. Other ghost towns lose their contents, furniture gets looted, windows get broken, buildings collapse and are cleared. The evidence of the people who live there fades. In Pripyat, because of the radiation, because of the restricted zone, because the Soviet Union and then Ukraine sealed it off. The contents stayed. Walk into an apartment building today, and you'll find, or you used to find, before looters and time did their work, stacks of vinyl records, school exercise books with children's handwriting, gas masks, dolls, a piano, a half-finished chess game. The most iconic image from Pripyat, the one you've seen 1,000 times, is the Ferris wheel. Pale yellow, oxidized, still standing in the amusement park that was never opened. The park was built for the May 1st celebrations, 5 days after the disaster. It never welcomed a single visitor. The Palace of Culture Energetique still stands, its grand facade intact, the interior colonized by birch trees growing through the ballroom floor. The Lazerny swimming pool, one of the best in Soviet Ukraine, continued to be used by workers at the plant until '96. Now the tiles are cracked, the water gone, and saplings grow in the shallow end. And the hospital. This is where the first responders, the firefighters who didn't know what they were walking into, were treated. In the basement, their clothing and gear still sits, intensely radioactive, a place even experienced guides treat with extreme caution. Part 4. Nature. Here's the thing nobody expected. Without humans, nature didn't just survive in the exclusion zone. It thrived. The 1,600 square kilometer Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, the restricted area around the plant, has become, accidentally, one of the largest nature reserves in Europe. Wolves roam in packs larger than anywhere else in the region. Lynx have returned. Brown bears were spotted for the first time in a century. Przewalski's horses, an endangered wild species, were deliberately introduced and now run free across the zone. Bison, eagles, rare migratory birds stopping in wetlands that would otherwise have been drained for agriculture. There's a forest near the plant called the Red Forest, named for the color the pine trees turned as they died from radiation in 1986. That forest is still one of the most contaminated places on Earth. But even there, life creeps back, slowly, unevenly, but persistently. Scientists are still debating exactly how harmful the radiation is to the wildlife here. Some animals show elevated mutation rates, some don't. What seems clear is that human presence, agriculture, hunting, construction, was more damaging to biodiversity than the radiation. The exclusion zone became an unintentional experiment, and what it showed us is both sobering and, in a strange way, hopeful. Part 5. The question of visiting, which brings us to the question you've been waiting for. Can you actually visit Pripyat? Yes, and here's how it works. The Chernobyl Exclusion Zone is administered by the Ukrainian government. Since 2011, it's been officially designated a tourist attraction, and before the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, it was receiving around 100,000 visitors a year. You cannot visit independently. You must go with a licensed tour operator who obtains permits from the Ukrainian government. These tours run from Kyiv, typically as day trips, though multi-day tours staying inside the zone were also available. At the checkpoint, you register, receive a dosimeter, a device that measures your radiation exposure, and enter the zone with a guide. A standard tour takes you to the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, where you can stand quite close to Reactor 4, now sealed beneath a remarkable steel structure called the New Safe Confinement, completed in 2016. You'll visit the ghost town of Pripyat, the school, the amusement park, the apartment blocks, the Palace of Culture, the Duga radar system, a massive Soviet over-the-horizon radar array, nicknamed the Russian woodpecker by Western radio operators, hidden deep in the forest, and Chernobyl town itself, which still has a small permanent population of around 300 people, mostly elderly residents, who returned illegally and were eventually tolerated. How dangerous is it? This is where it gets nuanced. The radiation in most of the tourist areas is, in radiation terms, relatively low, comparable to a long-haul flight or a chest X-ray. Guides are trained to keep groups on established safe paths, away from contaminated hotspots. You are told, don't eat or drink outside, don't sit on the ground, don't touch surfaces unnecessarily, and when you leave, you pass through radiation detectors to ensure you're not carrying contamination out. The hospital basement and certain spots in the Red Forest, Those are different. Those places are genuinely dangerous, and responsible tours handle them accordingly. The consensus among health physicists is that a short visit, following the rules, poses an extremely low additional cancer risk, so small it's statistically negligible compared to background risk. But, and this matters, that's for responsible tours on established routes, not for people who go off trail, break the rules, or visit without a licensed guide. Part 6. The War and What's Happening Now. There is something I need to address directly. In February 2022, Russian forces invaded Ukraine, and their initial advance came through the exclusion zone. They occupied the Chernobyl plant and the surrounding area for over a month. Soldiers, apparently unaware of or indifferent to the history, dug trenches in the Red Forest, drove through highly contaminated areas, stirred up radioactive dust. Scientists documented spikes in radiation readings during this period. The Russian forces withdrew in late March 2022, but not before reports emerged of soldiers showing signs of radiation sickness, a grim and almost incomprehensible echo of 1986. Since Ukraine regained control of the site, the focus has been on stabilization and safety assessment. The new safe confinement remains intact. The staff who maintain the plant, and it still requires active maintenance, return to work. As of now, in 2026, tourism to the exclusion zone remains suspended due to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The situation continues to evolve. If you're watching this and want to visit, monitor the situation, support reputable Ukrainian tour operators when tours resume, and understand that visiting is, in a very direct way, an act of solidarity with Ukraine's effort to control its own history and its own narrative about what happened here. Part 7. Why People Go. I want to be honest about why people visit Pripyat, because it's complicated. Some of it is pure disaster tourism, the morbid fascination with catastrophe, the thrill of the forbidden. And I don't think there's any point pretending that element doesn't exist. It's part of why people go, and it's worth being honest about your own motivations if you plan to visit. But for many people, something else happens when they're actually there. Because the scale of what Pripyat represents is almost impossible to comprehend from the outside. 50,000 people, gone. Overnight, a city. Their lives, their children's drawings on the walls, their food in the refrigerators, left intact. And then, slowly, over decades, claimed by birch trees and wolves and silence, it becomes very hard to stand in that school and look at the gas masks and the textbooks and not feel something about the fragility of civilization, about the relationship between technological ambition and human accountability, about what we owe to the people who live through things we only visit. These were real people, 50,000 of them, with lives that didn't feel like a history lesson. The best thing a visitor can do, I think, is remember that. Not just the Ferris wheel, not just the aesthetic of decay, but the 26-year-old engineer who lived in apartment 4B and played chess on Saturday afternoons and never once imagined that by Monday he'd be gone forever. Outro. Pripyat is a city frozen in a single moment, the moment a political system decided that control of information mattered more than the lives of 50,000 people. The physics of what happened there is well understood now. The reactor design, the test parameters, the explosion sequence. What's harder to reckon with is the human part, the system that created it, the people who suffered because of it, the workers who died fighting it, whose stories are still being told. That story is still alive, and as long as Pripyat stands, slowly, inexorably being consumed by the forest, it will be.
Some places don't stay with you because they're beautiful. They stay with you because they don't feel right. And even after you leave, a part of you wonders what would have happened if you stayed just a little longer. There are still places out there no one talks about, for a reason. This was Midnight Roots. Follow for more hidden places, untold stories, and destinations you were never meant to find.